Hello, everyone. Welcome to this month's webinar Wednesday for the National Weather Association. Thank you for joining us. Today, we're going to be talking about something near and dear to my heart, how to join or how to apply for a job in the National Weather Service. I've been working for the Weather Service for over 20 years, and basically, but I have not applied for a job in quite a while. So basically, I have one of my original 171s, SF-171. That's how you apply for the Weather Service. But I think, Trisha, things have changed a lot in the years that have passed since I last applied this was for my journeyman job. So Trisha, why don't you guys kick things up? Oh, wait, before I'm getting way ahead of myself, I want to introduce everybody. So joining on the call, again, my name's Tim Bryce. I'm part of the NWA social media team and the newly inaugurated webinar team. Also joining me on the call, who's going to be help monitoring Twitter, is going to be Trevor Boucher, he leads the social media team. And then our two panelists today will be Trisha Palmer. She's a senior forecaster there in the Greenville-Spartansburg FO at the National Weather Service in Eastern Region, and out in Atlanta at the Weather Forecast Office is Laura Bollinger. Not close. I didn't quite get it right, did I? I was close. Oh, I muted you. Can you go ahead and unmute yourself there?
Bollinger.
Ah, I was so close. All right. Laura is a journey forecaster there, but she's wearing two hats. She's also the acting senior service hydrologist. So I know that's really keeping her very, very busy. So Ms. Trisha, why don't you kick things off? I know that you got some neat statistics to show us and some good tips. I know there's some people watching who are very interested in how do you apply to join the National Weather Service as far as getting through the bureaucracy and giving them some ideas and things. So I'm going to turn things over to you now.
All righty. Well, thank you very much, Tim. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay. Well, like Tim said, my name is Trisha Palmer, and I'm a senior forecaster at the National Weather Service in Greenville-Spartanburg, South Carolina. I was previously at the Atlanta or Peachtree City office in Georgia, where Laura and I put together a version of this presentation a couple of years ago as a local outreach project. We both co-ran the student volunteer program there at Atlanta when I was there. So you met Laura already, so hi and welcome, Laura. Our presentation today is on applying to the National Weather Service, entry stats and application resources. Laura and I will be tag teaming this presentation, so bear with us, please, during the transitions. We will be talking a little bit about diversity during this in the Weather Service in our talk today. So the picture here on our title slide is from March 30th of this year, when Atlanta actually had an all-female crew on board. Well, that and the MIC, Keith Stallman. Incidentally, I also happened to be working that day here at GSP, so here's a little token picture of me and ops as well. All right. Some of the stuff we're going to talk about today, we got quite a bit to cover, and we're hoping we can cover it all in an hour. But if not, we may have to hang over a little bit, and we'll see what we can do about that. I do apologize in advance, though, if we end up spilling over. So we're going to start out with some basic background information on the National Weather Service. Some of you may already know this, but it's a good overview for those who don't. We'll go over some information about employment in the federal government, and specifically the National Weather Service. Then we're going to move on to the meat of the presentation, the nuts and bolts of the application process. We'll finish with some enlightening statistics gathered from the two latest mass intern bids, and I use mass in quotes because that's just what we termed it. And these intern bids were in 2014 and 2016. We just had another mass intern bid this past spring, and the selections haven't been announced just yet, but so we can't include those data, but we hope to incorporate them down the road, and Laura will explain some more about that. And just as a quick disclaimer, Laura and I are forecasters, and while we've bid on jobs ourselves and we've reviewed between the two of us probably hundreds of resumes, we're not selecting officials. Also, we're giving this presentation based on current procedures and data. Things can and occasionally do change, even in the federal government. So if you're watching this after the fact as a recording, please keep that in mind. All right, so I'm not going to read this verbatim to you. This is the National Weather Service mission statement, and you guys can read it as well as I can. But it basically boils down to the fact that we provide science-based decision support services for the protection of life and property. We don't go out there and actually fill up sandbags and you know, things like that to physically protect life and property. We provide the information so that the public can do it themselves. We are a part of the federal government. We're underneath the Department of Commerce, and our parent agency is the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. We do have several sister agencies, fisheries, satellites, NESDIS, Ocean Service, things like that. If you know the National Severe Storms Lab, they're under the Office of Atmospheric Research, so you see the little research image on there as well. And in the Weather Service, when we're talking about field offices, we're generally talking about weather forecast offices, or WFOs. I'm going to use that acronym, that abbreviation a lot, WFOs, river forecast centers, and then the Center Weather Service Unit. But to break it down even further, across the United States, we've got, of course, the National Weather Service headquarters. We've got 6 regions, and then those field offices are broken down into those 6 regions, and I'll show you a picture of that in just a second. And then there's the National Centers for Environmental Prediction, and you guys are probably most aware of like the Storm Prediction Center, the National Hurricane Center, things like that. Our newest one is the National Water Center down in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. So quite a bit of diversity as far as the atmospheric sciences with the National Weather Service. We're going to be mainly focusing on WFOs in this presentation. And as you can see, that's just a small, well, it's a large subset, but it is just a subset of all the National Weather Service offices out there. So if you have any other questions about other career paths in the National Weather Service, please just let us know. Across the United States, you can see here that the different regions are sort of the color, like this, the lavenderish color from New Mexico over to Georgia and Florida. That's the southern region of the National Weather Service. I mentioned that we've got 6 regions. So the light green color is the eastern region, and so on and so forth. And as you can see, basically, there's an office anywhere. Generally, just about anywhere you'd want to go, there's an office nearby, whether it's a National Weather Service, whether it's a WFO, or it's one of the other field offices like the RFCs or the CWSUs, or one of the national centers. And you can see that there are some areas like DC, Fort Worth, Kansas City, places like that, that we've got several offices sort of co-located all at once. All right, so again, some notes. This presentation is going to focus on meteorological careers at a weather forecast office. There are a lot of other career options. We've got information technology, hydrology, hydrometeorology, aviation. We've got a ton of them. So if you would like more information on any of those career fields, please just let us know. All right, so the career ladder at a typical WFO, generally you would come in as an intern, and we'll talk about some of the specifics of these job titles, but the intern itself is actually poorly titled. This is a full-time career position. It is not an intern in the way you normally look at the word. It's not like a volunteer position or a summer position. That is a full-time career position. After you're done with your internship, you would move up to meteorologist. The terms here are interchangeable between meteorologist, journeyman forecaster, general forecaster. You could then move on up to a senior meteorologist or a lead forecaster, and then you can move on up to office management. And again, we're not going to talk about the details of these positions. Just very quickly, though, the meteorologist in charge, he or she is the boss. You've got the warning coordination meteorologist, which is generally your liaison with external customers, emergency management and media. And your science and operations officer, these are the guys or gals in charge of any research, science, training in the office, things like that. All right, so I am going to pass it on to Laura, and she will talk about some statistics.
Hey, real quickly, can I interrupt here? I forgot to push the hashtag for today. So,
oh, yes.
Real quickly, let everybody know, if you want to chat in the YouTube chat, I'm monitoring YouTube chat, but we also have the broadcast, we have the Twitter going. So if you would like to ask a question via Twitter, I think Trevor is monitoring the Twitter feed, and that is at hashtag NWA WebWed. So that's NWA WEBWED. So feel free to tweet us at that, and we'll be happy to pass on your questions to either Laura or Trisha. So, Miss Laura, sorry to interrupt. I will hand things back over to you.
Not a problem. So as Trisha mentioned, I'm now going to discuss this next section on meteorologist statistics, specifically how weather service employment compares to other sectors and whatnot. So getting started here, if you look at the statistics from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, back in 2014, they estimated that there was roughly 11,800 meteorologist positions in the country. Now, you can see here based on this chart how that breaks down by sector. So the National Weather Service falls in the government sector. There's private entities, academia, broadcast groups, and then other things like military. Doesn't quite show as in the government. Now, the Bureau of Labor Statistics expects by 2024, so this was a 10-year projection, that there would be a 9% job growth. So it would bring the total to roughly just shy of 13,000 jobs. Now, if you look up the gender makeup in the National Weather Service of forecasters, it is still a very male-dominant field, which is, you know, across the board in all of those sectors I just showed. Now, the National Weather Service has had some improvement since 2009, so it's not quite a 10-year span here, but there has been a slight increase in women that are still working as forecasters or are working as forecasters. Now, if you look at based on position, so Trisha mentioned earlier, you typically are starting out as a meteorologist intern. You then move up the ranks to general forecasters, lead forecasters, and then management. And there is a little bit more of a male dominance in the more senior positions. But for the most part, you know, it's pretty standard across the board with a little bit of variability there. Now, as far as the ethnicity in the National Weather Service, again, in that same 10-year span, there has been a little bit more diversity there. And so you can see the breakdown between the 2009 stats and the 2017 stats. Now, these are self-reported statistics, so it's whatever you feel most identified by. Now, if you go back, the most recent statistics that we have for education backgrounds is from 2012. And so you can see here that the majority of people working within the Weather Service, now this does include non-meteorologist positions like administrative assistants, etc. But most of these people do say that they have earned a bachelor's degree. About 30% are saying that they have a master's degree, and you see doctors and associates there as well. We're going to discuss more on this later as far as students coming into the Weather Service or postgraduates coming into the Weather Service, what kind of education backgrounds they have. Now, how does the Weather Service compare to these other sectors when you look at salary potential? Now, for the most part, these are looking at general forecaster statistics. And we found these salaries online at various websites. There had to be at least 4 self-reported salaries for us to use it in this analysis. You can see that orange line across the middle there. That's the Bureau of Labor Statistics mean salary. So that is including the whiskers portion of the box and whiskers graph. And so it is skewed by people like around the Atlanta area. We would say Glenn Burns, Weather Channel, Jim Cantori, these people on the TV that do tend to make a little bit more money than the traditional broadcast meteorologists. They're likely the ones that are skewing this data. The one important thing to point out here is we're all topping out, all these sectors are all topping out about the same amount, around $100,000, but the Weather Service does typically start their forecasters at a little bit higher salary than some of these other sectors. Now, if you were to break that down by other private entities, you can see how those salaries do vary by group. So there are some that are lower than others and some that are higher than others. You can see when you do start looking into statistics like what a senior forecaster makes. So this is general forecasters through some of the lower management positions. The Weather Service does have a little bit more of a range there, while some of these other private groups make more similar amounts. Now, as far as the salary potential within the Weather Service and the time span you can expect, the majority of people coming in are starting out as a meteorologist intern, and you can see that's anywhere between maybe $40,000 and $60,000 a year, which shows up as a GS 5 through 11, and Trisha's going to talk a little bit about that in the next section. Now, typically, you are promoted within the first 1 to 4 years following some rigorous training that the Weather Service does provide. And then you are promoted to a GS-12, which does then offer a higher salary. Now, the longer you're in the Weather Service, the more benefits that you're accruing, such as vacation time and annual leave. So just to speak briefly on federal employment information with the kind of benefits and pros and cons for working for the federal government. Some of the pros, for example, are that there are locations across the country. Trisha showed that map earlier. There are 122 Weather Service forecast offices across the country, and various other regional offices. But even still, because of the amount of attrition, people retiring, you have a limited number of jobs that are available each year, roughly only 25 to 50. Now, there is known salary potential, and that's a big pro. You have an idea of what you'll make once you are in, but salaries greater than $150,000 are rare. So if that's something you're looking for, then maybe your private company is the way to go. Now, we do get compensation for things like nights and overtime or holiday pay, working Sundays. So that allows you to earn a little bit more money, but it is rotating shift work. And so, you know, in order to get the night pay, you have to work night hours. So some people may not prefer that kind of schedule. Now, as far as job security goes, that may be seen as a huge pro. We get nearly annual pay raises. That's a big deal. But the problem also is that our jobs are often, I guess, when you look at how much each position is paid, you are going to be making basically the same amount of money as the person sitting next to you if you have the same position title. You may work harder than they are or vice versa, but you will basically still get the same pay. And so that can oftentimes also be seen as a con. That being said, there are cash awards if you have outstanding performance. And if you move from office to office right now, they do offer paid moving expenses. And there are some excellent benefits as far as vacation time, health insurance, life insurance. Now, as far as other cons, a lot of times people have an association with the government that there's this stigma, we're the government, we're here to help, and that may come across as a negative. Change is often slow, and there's often a lot of red tape that has to be pushed through in order to get things accomplished. So that can be a bit of a challenge. Now, as far as the benefits go, we have a generous leave program. You can see here that it's a combination of holiday leave or holiday pay if you're having to work, vacation time, which is often referred to as annual leave, and then sick leave. Now, sick leave accrues annually. There's no maximum. It will accrue for as long as you're an employee. Now, your vacation time accrues annually, and you can carry over 30 days into the following year. So that's your maximum carryover. Now, how does this compare to other companies? We chose 2 companies here, and you can see that their vacation and sick leave policies are quite a bit lower than what the Weather Service offers, and they may not observe all federal holidays as well. So something to keep in mind. Now, the government does offer health, life, disability, and long-term care insurance if you opt into those. And there's a really good matching program through the Thrift Savings Plan, and the government does match to some extent up to 5%. It's dollar for dollar up to 3%, and then from there on forward, it's just 50%, but that's pretty significant. Now, Trisha, I'm going to turn it over back to her, and she's going to talk about applying for a National Weather Service position and how you go about doing that and some sort of steps and tips to follow.
Hey, Trisha.
Yes.
Real quickly, I do have a question. I don't know if you've addressed it yet.
Okay.
Let me ask you, Grant said that he heard that mentioned that the 2017 intern hiring decision hadn't been finalized. is there an estimate when this would be announced and when the candidates would be contacted? Do you know anything about that kind of information?
I'll actually talk about how some of that works here. As to this specific, yeah, I know that they've done. I didn't know that this one had been the ones that they have been selected. I knew that they had done some interviews, and it's possible that not every office has selected. But yeah, we'll talk about the timeline that students and prospective employees can expect with this. Are there any other questions right away?
Nope, that was it.
Okay. All right. So moving on to the nuts and bolts of how to apply for a weather service position. Well, I'm going to first talk about, Laura mentioned GS. So what is the general schedule? And this is this GS that we're talking about. And there's a website there that you can go and you can look and get some information on our pay and leave. We are funded by the taxpayers, so it's all information that's out there and publicly available. So basically the GS is a classification and pay system covering the majority of the civilian white-collar federal employees, and it's administered by the U.S. Office of Personnel Management. There are 15 grades, so it's GS1 through GS15. And within each grade, there are 10 steps per grade. And as you move up a step, say from a GS, if you're a general forecaster, for example, that's a GS12. If you move up from a GS12 step 1 to a GS12 step 2, that step will be approximately an additional 3% of your employee's salary. Now, the way it works is you go through step 1, 2, 3, 4 every year. Step from 1 year to the next, you go 1, 2, 3, 4. Step 5, it takes 2 years to get there. Step 6, it takes 2 years, and so on, and then it expands out to 3 years. So it normally takes 18 years to advance from step 1 to step 10 within the same grade. So that's quite a while. So the pay raises get further and further apart. So your entry GS level for an intern position, these are the minimum requirements for these GS levels. So to come in as a GS5, you need your bachelor's degree. If you wanted to come in as a GS7, generally you'd need to have either a year of specialized experience, the BS degree and superior academic achievement, or a year of master's work. As a GS9, generally it's 2 years of your master's work or your master's degree. I don't know why it flipped forward to that, but that's generally the salaries that you can expect for the different GS levels. And of course, this is going to vary on location. If you're working at an office like mine in Greenville, Spartanburg, upstate South Carolina, we don't get any locality pay, but you get a little bit of extra money working someplace like Atlanta or DC or place like that. And that's all at the OPM website. Now, just to note, these GS levels, these entry GS levels are not guarantees. These are the minimum requirements. You may have your master's degree, you may even have your PhD, but you may only be offered a position at the GS5 level. So you've got to be thinking about that in the back of your mind. Am I willing to take a GS5 just to get in? And that's happening more and more. So again, these are the entry level requirements, and I am not going to read through all of this. The point is that when you get your degree or in atmospheric sciences or meteorology or whatever the related field is, you need to have all of this stuff. Again, this information is all available online, and I'll show you where that is here in just a second, but it's spelled out by the number of hours you need for each of these courses or each of these topics. So how does the application process work? Well, the first thing you're going to want to do is have your resume ready, have everything ready to go, and then wait for a position to open. Once it opens, you apply for that position. After 2 weeks, that bid will close. Each position is open for 2 weeks, and so that closes, and it closes on the midnight of the last day, Eastern time. So you have until 11:59 p.m. Eastern to submit your application. So if you're in Central Time or Mountain Time or whatever, you've got to keep that in mind as well. So just generally don't wait till the last minute. Then the applications are all reviewed by our human resources personnel up at Workforce Management. All right, so these are not meteorologists, these are human resources people. The first pass they do is they go through and determine eligibility. Do you meet the basic requirements? Do you have your degree? Do you have the 9 hours of this and the 6 hours of that? So on and so forth. So then they're going to pull out people who don't meet that minimum eligibility. And then with the people that are left, they go through and they rank the candidates. They give everybody a score based on how they answer the questions. And I'll talk about the questions here in just a second. Now, approximately the top 10 of those candidates, and we refer to this as the panel, are then referred to the selecting official, whether that's the MIC or if the office doesn't have an MIC, it's an acting MIC, or if you're looking at the river side of the office, the HIC, the hydrologist in charge, whoever that selecting official is, they are going to get approximately the top 10% of those candidates. The selecting official and or the selecting team then goes through and reviews the applications, and in some cases they may have a lot of applications to go through, and they're going to narrow it down to the top few candidates for interviews. They don't have to, but that's generally the way it works. Once they do the interviews, then the MIC selects the top candidate, and then they send an email. They inform workforce management. They say, this is the person I have chosen. Once workforce management gets that information from the MIC, they contact the selectee with an offer, and this is an unofficial offer. This is a tentative offer, and then the selectee then accepts or rejects the offer. If you're accepted, the paperwork ensues. Now, the length of time from when the position opens to when the selectee arrives on station can be as little as 12 weeks to as much as a year, and it seems to be trending more like for a year. And a lot of this is due to the personnel at workforce management, because there's a lot of positions that they're having to go through, and specifically the length of time necessary to get the security clearance for that person. So if the positions have been selected for the intern bid that we just did this spring, whether workforce management has contacted the selectees with the offers or not, if they haven't, then it's just a matter of time for them to go through and get to that. Once they've provided those tentative offers, and the selectee has accepted or rejected, again, it's tentative, it's not official, the amount of time it takes to do all the security paperwork, that can be itself 3 or 4 months. So it may take a while for people to know whether or not they got if you don't get an email from workforce management, then you'll know for sure you didn't get it. But I'll get into that a little bit more in just a second. Okay, so how to apply. The first step, you got to go to usajobs.gov, and you're going to want to create an account. Go in there, click on that, create a USA Jobs profile. Once you get in there, you're going to go in and they create that. We use profile interchangeably here. So your profile is going to be your demographic information, your contact information, that kind of stuff. So you're going to go through, update all of that, your address, everything like that. You can then add documents, and those kinds of documents will be resumes, things like that, and I'll get into those details in just a minute. So with your resume, you have the option to upload an external resume or use the internal resume builder. I'll talk about the differences in those in just a second as well. And then those extra documents is the transcripts and things like that. And again, I'll talk more on that later. So you go to usajobs.gov and you've created your profile. Now you're going to want to search for jobs. The easiest way to search I have found is by series. So every position in the federal government has this series number. So meteorologist is 1340. So that's generally the easiest way, but you can also type in the keyword meteorologist or something like that. But 1340 gets you straight there without any problems with ambiguity. So you go and you search, and you can also then narrow down that by department and agency if you want to. You can search for DOD jobs, you can search for National Weather Service jobs, generally just NOAA. If you search for NOAA, that'll help filter it down. And you can see here, once you start searching for jobs, this is how you narrow it down by the department and agency as you click this button right there. An important thing to remember is that there's a difference between federal versus public, and that's this hiring path right here on the right. And if we zoom into that, you guys, if you're not current federal employees and if you're not veterans, then you need to select this open to the public. Once you get further in the Weather Service, general forecaster positions, senior forecaster positions, WCM, SUS, those are only open to federal employees. So you're not going to see them generally open to the public. So that's an important distinction there. Okay, like I said before, the positions are open 2 weeks at a time, and I had great timing this spring when I was putting this together. And here's the announcement for the mass intern bid. This was 31 vacancies here. So these were only open at the GS 5 and 7 level. You can see they didn't even offer it as a 9. So the trick here is that you're going to want to preview the questions. And when you scroll down a little bit, you click on this how to apply, click the little plus button right there, scroll all the way down, and you'll see this here, this to preview questions, click here. It's kind of hidden. So if you click there, then you'll see all the questions pop up. Now, the important thing is that you're going to want to support your answers with experience that's in your resume and maximize those answers, but do not lie because they'll probably figure you out. So like here's one example of one question. How familiar are you with the principles, processes, and techniques of operational meteorology and hydrology? You're not going to want to answer this one down here because if you're not familiar at all, why the heck are you bidding on it, right? But if you're going to answer with this top level here, usually without review by a supervisor or senior employee, you've got to be able to back that up. So one of the application tips that we have is you take keywords or phrases from those questions and embed them somewhere in your resume. Here's another example. Do you have experience collecting meteorological data into real-time and archive databases and evaluating the data to ensure data integrity? There's a lot of data in there. Again, you don't want to answer you haven't had education, training, or experience in performing this task because, again, if you aren't able to answer a little bit higher than that, it's a question, why are you able to bid at all? But here's some examples of some key words: real-time and archive databases, ensuring data integrity, things like that you can embed those key words or key phrases into your resume to help make it a little bit easier for workforce management to pour through what you've got. Because again, the workforce management folks are human resources, not meteorologists. So in your resume, like I said, you've got the option to upload a resume externally, or you can use the internal resume builder, and really either is fine. If you don't want to use the resume builder, however, I would suggest going through it anyway, just to see what kind of info they recommend. So for example, just to go through it one step at a time. So here's the resume builder. You give it a name. I named mine Test. So the first thing that they're going to want to do is have you add some work experience. Okay, so you add some work experience. All right, so here's sort of the stuff that they're looking for. Where did you work? How long did you work there? How much were you paid? And some of this is optional. We recommend you fill everything out as much as possible. Your duties, accomplishments, and related skills. Now, you can see here there are 5,000 characters available in that spot. The problem with using the resume builder is that you can't use cool bullets or bold or underlined or italicized or anything like that. This is just like a plain text. So you can use like an asterisk or a dash or something like that to sort of fake a bullet, but you can't tab it over, you can't indent it. And so that's why sometimes the external resumes are a little bit easier for a selecting official to read. But again, either one is perfectly fine. So once you've got your work experiences in there, you can go on to your education, and you're going to want to fill this out for every school you've attended. What was your major? What was your minor? What was your GPA? Again, it says optional, but we recommend you go ahead and fill that out as much as possible because it's going to be on your transcript anyway, and your transcript is required. Any relevant coursework, licensures, and certifications, anything like that you can think of that you can put in there. Did you take any honors courses? It's better to have too much information than not enough. So once you're done with your education, then you can add job-related training. So if you guys have started taking any COMET courses, or if you've visited your local office and done a media workshop or a student workshop or something like that, that's a great place for that. Your language skills. And don't just think of English, Spanish, French, those kinds of things. Put computer languages in there. There's a lot of Python and some Java in the Weather Service. Anything like that you can do. HTML, web stuff, put that in there. Your organizations and affiliations. We're going to plug the AMS and the NWA specifically for NWA WebWed. So if you're a member of those organizations, go ahead and add that in there. If you're a member of your local chapter, and it doesn't have to be a meteorological organization. If you've got other student organizations that you're part of, anything that you've got, any publications, additional information. If you've got any honors or awards, any scholarships or something like that you want to put in there, put that in that part. If you saved the mayor's cat and got the key to the city, put that in there. Put everything in there that you can think of. All right, so as for your job history, you're going to want to include all your jobs. This gives an insight to your character. If you had to be a pooper scooper when you were in high school in order to make some extra money to save for college, you know what? Put that in there, because that tells the selecting official something about your tenacity, what you're willing to do. It also provides a timeline, and if there are gaps in your resume, you want to be ready to explain them. You know, what did you do for those 4 or 5, 6 years? That did you get into trouble or something like that? Well, it's better to be honest up front and explain any gaps in your resume. Maybe you just took time off. Maybe you're coming back to a career. Maybe you took time off to be a parent. That's fine. You can do that kind of stuff. That's perfectly fine. Like I said, just be ready to explain them. Once you're in the weather service, then for future jobs, you can focus on the meteorology related positions. You can take out the pooper scooper job that you had back in high school, that kind of stuff. It's going to ask you for every job, is it okay to contact your current supervisor? And if you're doing the internal resume builder, you're going to want to always select yes, unless the person is, you know, retired or has passed away. You generally don't want to select no, because that just doesn't look good. There is also a section for references. Definitely get permission before listing individuals, and limit your personal references to one. That would be like a pastor or something like that. Otherwise, keep them professional. In your resume, you're going to want to add any meteorology related experience that you have. If you have any forecasts that you've done in your research, like the Weather Challenge, all that kind of stuff. If you were a research assistant as an undergrad, any of that helps. Any computer experience, any outreach that you've done, you could even list all the presentations that you've given, because that's a skill that we're looking for in the weather service as well. Can you present? Any leadership experience that you have, it doesn't have to be meteorology. Again, if you were a resident advisor or on the student council or something like that, any student body president, high school, college, whatever, you can go ahead and put all that in there, because that's all important at this point in time. I mentioned the awards and accomplishments already. And if you're not a professional society member, join now. The student rates are actually very reasonable, and we do all sorts of great stuff for students, especially at the annual meeting and things like this, NWA Web WED. Community service volunteer work, please put that on there. That's really important. If you helped out at an animal shelter or a nursing home or anything like that, anything that you've done to volunteer, that's really important. Again, it tells us a little bit about you and you as a person, your character. Some more resume tips. You're going to want to use bullets, don't use paragraphs, especially if the selecting official has like 150 of these things to go through. They're going to want to be able to pick out some highlights, so don't use paragraphs. Organize it by subject and reverse chronologically. So put the most recent jobs or the most recent experiences first, and then work your way backwards. Again, for every question in the application, go through the question word by word and make sure you have something in your resume to back that up. How you answered that question, justify that in your resume. Spell check. We shouldn't have to say this, but we do have to say this. Definitely spell check. Very important, have a current weather service employee review your resume and application. It's really important to network. Go out and meet people. Laura will talk about this in a little bit, but that's really, really important, very critical. And another really important note for the weather service, shorter is not necessarily better. Don't send a one-page resume in, because it's just not enough information about you. That's not how the federal government works. You might consider a full resume, which may be more like 5 or 10 pages, and then you could add a corporate or summary resume, which might be 1 or 2 pages just to catch the highlights. So some things you can add to your resume. Again, experience. If you can get a pathways position, I haven't seen many open recently, but that would be great. If you are if you're going to be a sophomore this year, apply for the Hauling Scholarship this following year. I think Laura's going to mention that the NWA scholarship applications are due today. She's got a little bit more information about that as well. Be a volunteer at a National Weather Service office. There are things that you can do. You can contact your local office, just ask them if you can volunteer. A lot of them have an application process as well. If you can be a teaching assistant, participate in a research project, all this stuff will help add to your resume. Leadership. You want to demonstrate that you can lead, and most importantly, help others accomplish their goals. Servant leadership is a really big thing. We really look for people who will help others. And as a side note, this is really, really critical in our field, because if you look around you, if you're sitting there with other students or other people there, you never know who might be your boss someday. It could easily be one of your current classmates. In the case of my office here at Greenville-Spartanburg, our current MIC used to be an intern here years ago. And so there are some people that are still here when he was an intern. So it's things like that. You just never know who's going to be your boss. It's really important. So some of the additional documentation that you need for your application. Transcripts, they are required for all degree programs, even if they're incomplete. Cover letter, this is not required, this is optional, and you are only allowed 1 per application. So if this is a mass intern bid, you're going to want to be generic. And I've talked to lots of MICs, and they seem to be 50-50 on it. A lot of them like cover letters because it tells them a little bit more about you, but if they already know you, you don't necessarily have to. Another option that you might consider is that if you're putting in a mass intern bid, use snail mail to actually mail a cover letter to the selecting official, because it's important to be able to really specify why you want to go to that office. says the MIC setting. Why does this person want to come to my office? What is it about my office, and why does this person fit here? Why should I select you? So that's important to understand that, again, if you're going to just do one cover letter for in this case, 31 applications, it's only going to be able to explain why you want to get into the Weather Service. It's not going to tell that specific MIC anything specific about why you want to go to that office. So that's just something to keep in mind. And of course, any educational requirements. And that's a little bit of a catch. And I'll talk about that in a second. Non-competitive selections. There are people who are put at the top of the list. So if you have veterans preference, if you're a former federal employee, or if you're going to use the Schedule A process for a disability, that kind of information needs to be added in this little other category, or the veteran other, something like that. You need to add the documentation for these. And as a note for everybody else, these non-competitive applicants, they're automatically put on top of the panel. And they may result in other qualified candidates missing the cut or being pushed out of that top 10%. So that's just important to understand. So back to the educational requirements. Sometimes it's not intuitive. Sometimes the transcript doesn't specifically list out the education requirements, even though you have it. So if your transcript says 4 hours of physics, well, maybe that included a lab, but does your transcript say a lab? Because a lab is required. But if it doesn't say a lab, you're going to get kicked out. Are the course names not intuitive? Does it say Principles of Meteorology 4 instead of remote sensing or something like that? So you might want to add a document detailing how you meet those criteria. Also, if you actually don't meet the requirements, do you not have ordinary differential equations? Do you not have remote sensing? Just because you have a degree in meteorology doesn't mean you're actually eligible to apply for the National Weather Service. Now, I do understand that the Weather Service is going to be reviewing some of these requirements, so it's important to go onto USA Jobs and make sure that your transcript meets the requirements that are listed. So one thing that you might consider doing is make it easier for workforce management, spell it out for them, show them how you meet the requirements. And this is actually a document that Laura put together for a bachelor's in Earth Meteorology, Atmospheric Science, whatever it might be. In this case, EAS from Georgia Tech. And so what she did was she took how these courses actually meet the requirements for the National Weather Service. So she spelled it out for them. So make it as easy as possible. Don't leave anything to chance, and don't second guess anything. So keep in mind that you might also need to specify in your resume that you're a U.S. citizen or registered for the Selective Service. All right, to make or not make the panel. Like I said, the panel is approximately the top 10% of applicants. So you are either referred to the selecting official or not referred on USA Jobs. It'll say something like this. It'll have this little referred button there on your USA Jobs. You might get an email too saying that your status has changed. You might not. I'll tell you, it took about 1.5 years, maybe 2 years for my status here to update from referred to hired, even though I had been at this office for at least 1.5 years. So it's a bit of a slow process sometimes. The interview process. A hiring official will likely interview the top 5 to 10 panel members, and every MIC does it differently. Every selecting official does it differently. They're not required in order to be selected, particularly if there's a quick timeline for the selecting official. They may not have time to conduct those interviews. So these interviews can be done either by phone or video conference, or very rarely it might even be in person. Just be ready for anything. It may be conducted with just the selecting official or with a team of people, a management team. They might even bring in a couple of forecasters to help. You may only have one interview, or there may be a series of follow-up interviews, and again, different formats for each of these. And they may include only oral questions over the phone, or like I said, video conference, or it could be a combination of oral questions and maybe written assignments, like a sample forecast discussion or a social media post, or put together a briefing package for your emergency managers or partners. Again, be prepared for anything. Any of these things could be possible, and different MICs handle it differently. So, are you selected? Well, do you know or do you not? Eventually, you'll get that official notification. Like I mentioned earlier, it'll be an email from Workforce Management with the tentative offer. And this is a sort of an example of what the email will look like. It'll say, congratulations, you've been selected for this position. For interns, relocation expenses are not authorized. And this is not considered a final job offer. In this case, 2 work days to reply to everybody on this email, and they would have sent it to the MIC and the regional director and things like that, and either indicate that you're going to accept or decline. And then paperwork ensues, and it might take a long time to become official. Again, 2 work days there. Just a point, if you're going to decline an offer, maybe you shouldn't have bid on the job to begin with. So really, don't bid on a job you're not willing to take. Now, it may be that you're offered 2 or 3 positions in the same day, or from the same region, or maybe like this past bid was from Central Region and Alaska Region. In that case, that's okay because workforce management is aware of it. So that would be the one exception. But if you just change your mind, you probably shouldn't do that. Then you will get eventually an email from workforce management with your formal offer. And like I said, there's going to be lots of paperwork. You're going to have to go get your fingerprints done, get the security clearance, get letters of, they're going to have to send like special letters to friends and family that you list out saying, indicate they're going to have to vouch for you as a person, that you're not a horrible person or a criminal or something like that. All right. Now I'm going to pass it back to Laura.
Okay, so now unfortunately, this is the point at which we have arrived with the harsh reality. So this is the bad news, but there's some good news at the end, so hang in there. So right now, let's see. I only see Trisha. Is it just me?
I can see everybody else.
Okay, there we go.
Sorry
okay, so John Knox put together a study back in 2008, and it estimated the number of Bachelor's of Science degrees earned per year in the field of atmospheric sciences or meteorology. And the estimate is greater than 600 of those degrees every year. So if you look at that and then look at the number of entry-level Bachelor's of Science meteorology positions every year, it's under 300. So that estimated number of entry-level National Weather Service positions, if you were to further break that down, is only 25 to 50, and that's across the country. So if you were to break down the numbers here, your chance of obtaining any entry-level meteorologist position anywhere, not just in the Weather Service, but anywhere in the United States upon graduation, by the numbers is 50%. But in reality, it's less than 25%. You're not only competing with master's candidates, you're competing with people that are coming out of the military, private sector. All those people are also competing for the same positions you are. Now, the take-home point here is more than 75% of you will either have to leave the field for other types of employment or go to graduate school. There are some other options, and we'll take a chance a little bit later in a few slides to discuss what other options you might have. Okay, so your chance of obtaining any entry-level National Weather Service position anywhere upon graduation by the numbers is only about 5%. Again, we're only talking 25 to 50 positions open every year, and that does vary. But in reality, it's almost 0%. And so when Trisha and I first heard these numbers, we were a little surprised. So we decided to do some research of our own. So we often had been told, and we were trying to determine ourselves whether or not, in order to be offered a position at the National Weather Service, you actually need more experience than just a Bachelor's of Science degree. Okay, so what we did was we looked at 2 mass intern panels. So what that means is that these were positions that were not just bid out or offered for applications at a single location. These were a large quantity of internship positions that were offered at various locations across the country. It ended up being there were 2 mass bids, one in 2014 and one in 2016. And between those 2, there were 72 positions that were filled. Now, just for the first one alone, there were 1,400 people that applied for roughly 59 positions. So that gives you some kind of idea of the competition there are for these positions. Now, if you were to break down the applicants, take that top 10%, which is usually what happens to be the panel, and then look at the selectees. If you were to look at just the panel and the selectees, just because we brought out diversity earlier in the presentation, it's roughly the same, but we're talking somewhere around 80 to 85% male, and then the difference female, as far as the number of applicants and panel and then selectees there. Okay, so if you were to look at the education diversity of the panel for all of these 72 jobs, roughly 43% of the panel are just bachelor degree holders. But then if you look at the people who are selected, only about 30% of the ones that are selected have a bachelor's degree. So more than 70% of the jobs went to applicants with some graduate level education, whether or not that was a completed degree or just some additional coursework. Now, we always run into students that say, well, I'm the best student in my class. Couldn't I be competitive with just a bachelor's of science degree? So what we did was we broke it down and only looked at the students that had bachelor's degrees when they applied to determine what else was on their resume that made them look competitive. So if you were to break it down, this is the panel members. So these are the people that workforce management had weeded out and said that, yes, you are eligible for this job. And then this group of people then made it to a hiring official's desk. So there was, I have highlighted here, there was 11% of this panel group that had no additional background other than just their meeting the academic requirements. Now, we also determined whether or not people had private sector experience, volunteerships, a combination of the two. There was a good number of people that had military backgrounds, were hauling scholars, or had some previous government experience, like they were a SCEP or a pathway student, or maybe they worked as a meteorologist in another branch or something like that. And then we also have publications in there as well. So if you look at the number of people that actually were selected for these 72 positions, as you can see here, not a single one who didn't have any kind of additional background experience made it as a selectee. So you can see here that a large portion of them in the yellows, oranges, and reds were either private sector employees or had some kind of volunteer experience. So if you were to kind of summarize this, 72%, a little less than 3/4 of the bachelor's only selectees had government work or other kind of program experience or had a productive volunteer internship. About 20% had private sector experience, and then the remaining almost 10% served in the military. And so there was some level of veterans preference that was there. Okay, so now let's look at everybody, not just the people that had bachelor's degrees. How would that break down? So again, we've got roughly 11% of the entire panel has no additional background other than whatever degrees they have. In this case, that could have been some graduate work. It may not have been. Okay, so if you were to break this down, some of those students that had no additional experience on their resume did still make it in. Now, I want to say that there are a lot of you out there who are really interested in becoming National Weather Service forecasters. And so you may not be in a position by the time some of these jobs are out there, you may not be in a position to go out and acquire some private sector experience or join the military, or your opportunity to be a hauling scholar has passed. Consider bidding on jobs that you think may have less competition. So if you think about it, the jobs that are located in high population centers, for example, our forecast office here in Atlanta, you can imagine there are a lot more people trying to bid on intern positions coming to Atlanta than to, say, some smaller office located elsewhere in the country. So consider really opening up your opportunities and consider bidding on a job that may be at an office that has a smaller area or a lower population center or something like that. Okay, so what are your options now? You know, we've given you the harsh realities here. What can you do now? Okay, so you can go pursue your master's degree or your PhD. You could join the military. If you already have a college degree, you can oftentimes, you go right in, you join as an officer, going through officer training. So consider that. Seek other employment. We're not talking that these people had 20 years of private sector experience. It may have only been 1 or 2, but it was still employment in a related field that made their resume look more significant. Be sure to establish and maintain your networks, and that includes staying in touch with people. Trisha and I, when she was here at this office, we managed a very structured volunteer program, and we still to this day are keeping in touch with a lot of those volunteers who are asking for assistance in their application resumes and the whole application process. So network with people, whether it's through professional organizations like NWA or AMS, or visiting your local National Weather Service office. Stay in touch with those people, and then be sure to step up your game. Join the local chapters, do volunteerships. You have to be a current student in order to be a volunteer, so be sure you keep that in mind. If you have already graduated, you cannot officially be a National Weather Service volunteer. You can also do research. Go to conferences and present that research. Get your name out there. Be sure that you can kind of make yourself known as a model student. Be a leader, whether it's within the field of meteorology or outside of that field. And then always be sure you try and incorporate your passion. For example, I can't remember the specifics entirely, but if you are interested in football games, or you yourself as a football player, you know, go and figure out how you can provide some assistance as far as like lightning detection or help a local football stadium determine what their lightning plan is. Those are ways that you can get some related experience. Always have a backup plan too. Consider a double major if you're not going to get a graduate degree. Consider GIS or engineering, or a minor in Spanish or some other foreign language, or computer science. Pursue a related field for your master's degree as well. Now, here's some suggestions. You know, there's if you want to go into a private sector a group, having a background in business or economics may be the way to go. We're continuing to move into this kind of focus on GIS and offering decision support to our partners. And so having a background in IT or computer science, that's important. So there's some of these things listed on here. Get creative, but having a diversified background could help you stand out from the crowd. Okay. Now, keep in mind, all meteorologists are just that. They are meteorologists. So it's not good enough to just be the best forecaster in Weather Challenge. That's great. It's a good experience to be in. But just because you're a good forecaster does not mean you'll necessarily stand out from the crowd. A lot of students are applying with high GPAs from great universities. So being the best student in your program may not be enough. Being a fantastic meteorologist is going to be the minimum in this highly competitive market. So set yourself apart. And one of the ways that we sort of encourage students as they're applying to set yourself apart is to remember this idea of pie, okay? So this is a corporate model for career advancement, and each of these sections of the pie stands for something. And it's a balance of performance, image, and exposure. So we like to summarize it by saying it's not what you know, and it's not who you know. It's who you know that knows what you know. So the first slice of the pie, this 10%, is performance, and it's how you carry out or accomplish your job and responsibilities. So it's a good first impression, okay? So you immediately get an idea of, for example, salty versus sweet. Your level of performance must be the best. That's the first impression you're getting. And that then opens the door to the remaining 90%. So the next 30% is on image. So a lot of times when we're conversing, or you're presenting, or you're offering a little view of yourself through email, even, for example, your nonverbal communication in your presentations includes things like body language and personal space, gestures, but this also includes, like, in your emails, your grammar or your spelling and capitalization. So keep that in mind as well. Now, for your verbal communications, this is speech, your publications, how they're written. So this is sort of the secondary step, the second impression that people are getting, that image. It's also for tone, whether or not you come across as really defensive or really aggressive. Now, the final slice of the pie model is exposure, and that 60% is the visibility you're going to have inside and outside of your organization. And this is the part that really counts. So it has the greatest impact on your advancement. And it not only is informing people about your performance, that first slice of the pie, but also your image. And so this is where network really matters. And so I encourage you, as I mentioned, go meet people at your local National Weather Service office if that's the career you're aiming for, or go get your name out there through publications or joining those professional organizations. Do not wait until you are about to graduate before you start making these plans. And I'm sure Trisha would reiterate this as well. We are here to help. If your dream is to work for the National Weather Service, then we would like to help you. So please take that initiative and contact us and ask questions. There was one more thing I wanted to add, and that was today is a big deadline for the National Weather Association scholarships and some of the grants here. So I pulled up this website. I hope that you guys can see it here. But a lot of these applications close later on today. So please keep that in mind. If you're thinking of pursuing some additional schooling in the academic field, then please consider applying for some of these. Now, there are some of the applications that have already closed that they will reopen here in the fall. But then there are also some grants as well that you have one more week to get those in. So it's not quite too late yet. So with that, I will turn it back over to you, Tim.
Wow, lots of great information there. Very impressive. So again, I think Trevor has some questions that have come in on Twitter, and I'm going to let him ask those questions in a minute. Just again, real quickly, if you want to drop a question into the YouTube chat, I'll catch it. If you've got a question real quick and you want to alert Trevor, who's watching on Twitter, the hashtag again is hashtag NWA WebWed. So Trevor, what were some of the questions?
Well, one of them that came across, which was sort of already answered, but I'll answer it, or I'll ask it again so that you can answer directly. How can a student get into the National Weather Service if they can't get through pathways?
If they can't get into the Pathways program?
Right, alternatives to the pathway.
Okay, well, the big thing then would be volunteering. If, again, mentioning the Holling Scholarship, if you're a freshman, or if you're going to become a freshman this year, if you're just starting school, college, or if you're going to be a sophomore this year, you can apply for the Holling Scholarship your sophomore year, and that's a 2-year program. It's 2 years worth of scholarships, plus the summer between it, you do an internship at a NOAA office. So that's really cool. And actually what's great about the Holling Scholarship is we, NOAA employees, review them. Those are not reviewed by workforce management. Those are reviewed by us. We score them. NOAA asks for volunteers, and I've done it for years. So that's a great way to do it. And then volunteering is really the best way to do it. Like Laura said, you have to be a student if you want to volunteer, but the best way to do that then is to contact your local office. Go to weather.gov, find your local office, click on wherever is closest to you, or it doesn't have to be your college, it can be your hometown as well. You could volunteer just during the summer if you're at home with your folks. That would be an option. It's really important, again, that you remember you've got to be a student and you've got to have a productive volunteership. So the office may have you do a project. They may have you actually fill in on some shifts or learn how to release the balloons, the radio songs, anything they're willing to have you do. Just be willing to do whatever they need, within reason, of course.
I was going to reiterate that some of the offices that do the weather balloon launches, it's very important for them to limit the amount of training that is immediately necessary for people to start working shifts. So if you want to make a big impact on your resume, go ahead and get certified to do those weather balloon launches, and that gives you a leg up right away.
Very good idea. We here at the El Paso office, we're upper air, and we're always looking for somebody who's already upper air certified. It does, like you said, it cuts down on the training and it really helps us out. Any other questions, Trevor?
Uh-oh, Trevor's frozen in time.
Oh, he is frozen. Poor Trevor. Well, let me, I had Twitter up here. Let me, my tweet deck. Let me scroll back here. I was not paying as close attention to the questions because Trevor was all over it. Let's see, there was, let's see. I know you were talking about how to volunteer, we're always looking for, you know, I want to, like Trisha and Laura said, I want to encourage you, if you are interested in a meteorology career, just to contact your local National Weather Service. I've heard many stories of people who are got their career starts by just hanging out at the Weather Service, and you guys can learn a lot of information, just kind of get a feel for what it takes to work at the Weather Service office. Because I'll be honest with you, working at the Weather Service, maybe not the cup of joe for everybody. Shift work can be very taxing and difficult sometimes. The pressure to issue warnings and things like that. So it may not be for everybody, but that's what you're doing when you're in school, is figuring out what interests you, or maybe a different area of meteorology interests you. Well, I ran through Twitter real quick and I did not see any other questions. And I know on YouTube, where I just checked there a minute ago. So I think we're all caught up on our questions and everything. So if you
think there's one more question that may have come in on YouTube.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, it says message retracted. Never mind.
Well, there you go. So if you guys want to wrap things up, because I know believe it or not, it's already been an hour. And I want to thank everybody for sticking with us, who stuck with us. But ladies, if there's anything, any words of advice, last words here as we wrap things up.
I would say that, like, when we were going through and doing some of this research, one of the things that we have discovered since then is that there are people that got into the Weather Service that have since left. I mean, we're only talking, the first intern bid that we were looking at was 2014, and people have since left. Wow. Like you said, Tim, shift work isn't for everybody. It's definitely a lifestyle change. There's a lot of work-life issues that you have to deal with. If you're married or dating, or especially if you have kids, it gets very complicated. So it's not just about your career, it's about your life. And these are some big issues that you've got to sort through, because shift work is, like you said, is not for everybody. So ask questions. One of the things that we like to have volunteers do here at our office is come in and work a midnight shift during the summer when they're here. And then they can get an idea. It's only one, but it's better than nothing. It gives them an idea of, some of what you might have to deal with. You might pull an all-nighter every once in a while for college, but it's still not the same thing to have to work several of them in a row in a full rotation that it repeats itself week after week. So, but Laura and I, this is a big passion for both of us. We want to help people. Everybody in the Weather Service I've found is very helpful. So again, contact your local office. You can contact us, but contact your local office and ask questions. Just start asking questions and getting to know people.
And if you are no longer a student, it is not too late. You can go ahead and contact your local office anyway and sign up for some shadows. They can't officially have you come in and access the computers, but you can still go in and see the forecast process, talk to forecasters, see how they manage work-life balance, and really determine whether or not this is a position you would still like to pursue.
Very good. Lots of great information today. I really, like I said, I had this. I think I faxed this in. That's how I submitted my application. So on the one hand, it's great that you can do it all electronically now, but I do understand it can be a little overwhelming and a little that you got to attach and things like that. But I think if you look at what Trisha and Laura have provided you today, it will certainly ease the process in trying to make an application for the National Weather Service. So I thank you, Trisha. I thank you, Laura, for taking the time to do all the research and putting together this presentation and these slides.
We plug the next couple of webinars real quick.
That is what I was just getting ready to
very
do. So no problem. So we actually have we have 2 webinars coming up. 2. There's my fingers. We usually do 1 a month, but we actually have 2 coming up in July. We usually do the webinar Wednesdays as the first Wednesday in the month, but of course the first Wednesday in July is very close to July 4th, so we've punted it down the field to July 12th, where we will be talking about something that's exciting and new and interesting, which is Go 16. We're going to Go 16 webinar, and it's basically titled, Hello World, I'm Go 16, I'm here to help. So I'm really looking forward to that one. It sounds very interesting. We are also going to have just a few days later, either on the 13th or the 14th of July, we're going to have a discussion on the GOES radio frequency. And I know there's an issue around that as far as how we're getting data off the satellite and the radio frequencies that they are using or debating about not using. So that will be a very interesting debate. So like I said, in that week of July, or on July 12th, and then will be one on Go 16 on the how-to and the wherefore and all the neat bells and whistles with Go 16, July 12th. And then July 13th or 14th, we haven't quite set the day yet, we'll be talking about the GOES radio frequency issue. So those are the upcoming webinars. Again, I want to thank Trevor, who he had to drop off, but I want to thank him for monitoring Twitter. And again, I want to thank Laura and Trisha for putting in all the hard work on this presentation today.
It's our pleasure.
No problem. And remember, like Trisha said, we want to help you guys join the Weather Service. If that's your passion, we want to make it happen. So contact your local National Weather Service office, or contact me, Trisha, or Laura, and we will do our best to make that happen for you. So everyone have a great afternoon or morning, wherever it's still morning. I think it's still out in Hawaii, still morning. But everyone have a great day, and we will see you next month when we'll be talking GOES R or Go 16. Bye-bye.